The fields that we'd seen the week before were flooded and washed, like parts of them were washed away. And it was like going to a whole different place. I wanted to do more. I wanted to do something that would bring me to the field. I just kind of went and figured it out. I had the opportunity to discover things from experience of being in the place while I'm also gaining the skills and knowledge. The problem is there is no road for me to transport what I produce, right? So it's kind of like another way of seeing your produce just die.
You grew up in Kampala, Uganda, and you studied environmental science, and now you lead the Africa program for NASA Harvest at the University of Maryland. What was the moment or experience that made you realize you wanted to apply satellite and AI technologies to help farmers and food security rather than something else?
When I finished my undergraduate in environmental science, I had this opportunity to do field work. First, I went to the southwest of Uganda, where there's the biggest population of gorillas in the world. And then I went to the east of the country and I did forest mapping. So I was looking at deforestation or settlements up in the mountain, which is in this, should be a park. And when I did it, it was like this opportunity where I felt like it made sense, when you feel like you're in the zone. I wanted to do more. I wanted to do something that will bring me to the field, but also allow me to utilize my knowledge on using computers. We had this class on GIS and remote sensing, and I was fascinated by it, so I wanted to do that. When I met with Chris Justice, who ended up being my PhD advisor, in this meeting he was like, how would you like to go do fieldwork in Uganda? He introduced me to the Office of the Prime Minister in Uganda because he was involved in what's called GeoGlam, and they focus on agriculture, food security, remote sensing. So this is how I was one, not only had the opportunity to work back home, but also had the opportunity to tap into this broader community. So fast forward, I started to look at remote sensing of agriculture, drought, food security, and yeah, it's a very long story, but that's how it is. It's I didn't do agriculture or food security as part of my undergraduate research. I looked at forestry conservation. That's what I thought I was going to do. So it's a sequence of things that unfolded, and we're here today.
That's amazing. So you mentioned that you got your PhD here at the University of Maryland. What was your favorite part about doing grad level research here specifically?
I'd say my favorite part is the freedom I had and the opportunity I had to be able to figure out my research, in the sense that, having a meeting with your advisor and the first question is, how would you like to go do field work, right? It's what? I can do that. One of the things that is really interesting is the place that I ended up studying as my focus area for my research is in northeastern Uganda, where I'd never been. It's a completely different place from where I grew up. There's a lot of challenges, including having the lowest human development indicators in the country around poverty, health, etc. I did not speak the language. I just kind of went and figured it out. So that, I think, is my favorite thing, where I had the opportunity to discover things from experience of being in the place while I'm also gaining the skills and knowledge. Maybe the other thing would be access to world-class researchers, because our department leads a lot of NASA programs. At the beginning of my PhD, I used to work for the NASA Land Use and Land Cover Change program. So it's a program that is designed or was set up to study land use and land cover globally through remote sensing. And it's the names of the people that we cite in our research, or the equations that we use to calculate things. They're in the room with you, and it makes you feel like you're smarter just by proximity scenario. So I really, really like that.
On your personal website, on your profile, you note that advanced technology should benefit those who need it most, the farmers on the front lines of climate extremes. Can you share a story, maybe early in your career or not, when you felt technology was failing to meet the real farmers' needs, and how that informed your approach going forward?
Yeah, I have very vivid. I have a photograph in my office, which is from my very first field trip, and it was these two girls walking in a sorghum field that was basically destroyed by a drought. And this photo sort of brings me to this moment where, from my desk in my office, I knew that there was crop failure. I hadn't seen it, like I hadn't actually seen it in that context, but it's like that knowledge and that information about what was going on that we could measure from, you know, thousands of miles away, not resulting in any difference in terms of, I don't know, delivering. It could be food aid, but it could also be about solving problems that have been solved. So if you think about agriculture globally, there are lots of places where crops are being grown where they require a lot of inputs, otherwise it wouldn't be worth doing. But that type of technology is not accessible. So there's a whole sorts of complex things that make it hard. It's expensive, it's not a priority, there are not policies in place to help farmers access it. And so when you go to the field, and this is still true today, even though we have even more advances, we can, like, you know, from my perspective, I can monitor anything, anywhere. We know there's a lot of investment in manufacturing, you know, you've seen automated harvesters, etc. But none of those things exist in a lot of places around the world. So there are things that I think we take for granted, depending on where we live, that are not a given, where it's like, why doesn't it work? Like, why don't they do this here? And it's much more complex than we often think.
Yeah, oftentimes they're not black and white solutions. So we were talking about your PhD research in northeastern Uganda and how that helped design a disaster risk financing program, and that reached tens of thousands of households. Could you describe the field work there? A memorable farmer you met, a challenge you didn't anticipate, how that shaped the final PhD?
One of the trips that I went to, I made a mistake. I did not turn on my GPS for something. I don't remember what it was. And we did all this mapping and it was completely dry. So half of the team left and I stayed with the Linga, and we're like, we have to go back. I cannot not have mapped this, because we're doing drone flights too. So we had drone flights, but I didn't have ground samples because I don't remember why. But I went back a week later, and over the weekend there'd been extreme rainfall. And the place where I clearly walked, we drove over, we had to get out of the car and cross a river. The road was basically a river. And so the fields that we'd seen the week before were flooded and washed, like parts of them were washed away. And it was like going to a different, like a whole different place. Before it was completely dry and now it's completely wet. And then after that it's like no rain for 2 weeks. So it's not useful, the amount is not useful because it's concentrated and it just washes away things. But if you look at it from a climatology perspective, it's like, well, they get about the same amount of rainfall. There's no big problem there. So it's not distributed well in time. It's a concentrated amount, which is not so great.
How do people there store the water?
So at the beginning I mentioned this, like valley dams. Basically what they are, they're like man-made valley dams where they try to, as it's raining and flooding, you control where the water goes and the water can be stored for a longer period. But then the problem is getting that water from the dam to the plot, because the dam is going to be in one spot. You don't have a pump, you don't have pipes, and so whether it is there or not, it's not so useful for agriculture. So what if you enable me to have access to water during the dry season, and you give me the pipes, I can irrigate. You give me the seeds, my crops do great. You give me fertilizer, but there is no road for me to transport what I produce, right? So it's kind of like another way of seeing your produce just die.